Hi, this is Janet, and I'm in a conference room at UC Davis, which is there's spilling as well. Um, and it is a Thursday, so it's, excuse me, Writing Wednesday on Thursday. It's 5 o'clock, and I am, UC Davis is near Sacramento, which is the California state capital. And my husband, who is a writer, is the writer in residence this term at UC Davis, and I haven't seen him for 3 weeks. So that's why I wasn't here for Writing Wednesday, as I was on the road yesterday, driving up through the agricultural land and seeing all the, seeing the real California, Southern California. And everything is very green and full of flowers and, very much the way California had once been before all this climate change. So, Writing Wednesday is going to be kind of catch as catch can today. So please ask your questions. I can definitely use them. But I did get some questions for today. And let me answer them for you. The first question I got was, this is from Nicole. Writing is no easy feat, but let's say you finally do write a book. How do you go about getting it published legitimately? Are there book editors worth their price? Should you submit a couple of chapters, the whole enchilada? What about copyrights if they edit a huge chunk out? There are things that I find hardest to get unbiased info about from writers. Okay, so for all business type questions, poets and writers, if you're not reading it, get a subscription, start reading it. Hi, Linda. I can ask, pretty short. If you are a new writer, you will always be submitting a full manuscript. But there's a way to do it. You're not submitting it to the editors. You're submitting it to agents, and agents will, if you read Poets and Writers, they have a wonderful book called The Practical Writer with a chapter on agents. You will follow the agency instructions. So you will usually write a query, and then you will send what they ask you to send. If they read a bit and want to see more, they'll probably want to see 50 pages. And then if they like that, they'll want to see the manuscript. And then they are the ones who submit it to the agency, to the editors. Are book editors worth their price? Now, I assume that you mean work for hire, that you mean a freelance book editor who will work on your book before you send it to an agent. Are men good husbands? Some of them are, and some of them aren't. Are book editors worth their price? Expect to spend, maybe $4,000 or $5,000 for a good book editor. A good book editor, if you are, fabulously wealthy and that doesn't make you blink, I think that's probably money well spent if you are unsure about your book. That's such a personal question. Is it worth it? Because there are all kinds of editors, there are all kinds of books, there's all kinds of problems, there are all kinds of people who maybe aren't any better than you are editing your book. I don't know. I tend to like book editors who work for publishers. But if your agent sends it around and you're not getting any good response, your agent might say you need to get a book editor. If you can't get an agent, you might want to look at getting a book editor, but it is going to be a hefty chunk. $4 or $5 grand is what a good book editor will be asking. Hi, Jeffrey. So here we are on Thursday at 5. Okay, second question. Here's a one from Joanne McDonald Randall. Hey, Joanne. Who is considering a biographical novel, autobiographical novel, so I can cheat a bit, she says. I have lived a very colorful, long life, but I don't want to make it consistently first person, which seems too self-centered. Well, if you're going to write an autobiographical novel, it is going to be self-centered. If you want to write a novel, you can pick, you can make a character anybody you want. And then the story can flow from character to character. You can do a braided story where other people have a point of view. There's lots of things you can do. If you're going to write autobiography, it's going to be very self-centered because it's going to be about you. But it doesn't have to be introspectively self-centered, like navel gazing, because you are also the camera, and you can describe life in the towns, you can move to the big issues, what life was like in the early 60s, what was like in the 70s, what was journalism like, what's the point of journalism, and you can move to the big issues. You don't have to just say, and then I did this, and then I did this. You're going to shape it. If you're going to write autobiography, it's going to be in the first person. This is a really interesting question. I'm sorry I don't have a lot of books with me, so I might have to be using my own books as examples, which I prefer using other people, but it'll be whatever springs to mind. This was a really interesting question from Terry, who asked, how do you best approach introducing 4 characters at once? Mine are a group of 4 with 1 leader. Okay, so this is a point of view question. Where do you put the camera? In third person, you can describe the group can emerge like the message from an 8-ball. It's kind of blurry, and 4 girls crossed the quad at UC Davis, and one of them stopped to adjust her shoe, and then so the camera is large and you see the group, and then the eye goes to one and describes that person, and then the second person goes up and she has certain characteristics too, impatiently grabs the other one and drags her along, or whatever. Then you have 2. So you could describe them generally as a group, and then the eye goes to one, and then you go to a next one. If it is in first person, are you one of the girls? In which case, you don't group them. I is your first, obviously the introduction will be that we went somewhere, and my shoe was falling off. I stopped, and then Roxanne stopped and dragged me over. And then, Marie, who was in a hurry because her crush was in that class, still marched on ahead. And Valerie, did something, and then you've got 4 people in play. At the beginning of Marina M., I start with a party, and the 3 girls and the brother Serioja are in the nursery, and I introduce them from kind of a future self, a Marina as a grown woman looking at those girls. And so she describes them. She can describe all 3 of them, and then the brother and what he's looking at. And then as people speak, suddenly that person comes into focus, and you're going to describe them. Every time you describe them a little differently, you describe something else about them, and a picture gradually comes into mind. You try not to describe a group, try to get the individuals as soon as you can and what the relationships are. There is a wonderful chapter in Denise Nicholas's book, Freshwater Road, a scene in a bar in Detroit. And there are 8 characters in that. And take a look at that, see if you can find it. And take a look how those 8 characters begin to emerge. They're all in the bar. Maybe a couple come in, because 8 is a lot. So you start with the bar owner and the barman, the owner and the barman, and then a couple of people who are already in the bar begin to speak. And then other people come in 2 at a time. 2 men come in, they sit down, they talk, and they join the conversation at the bar, and then other people come in. So that's generally how you handle a big scene. And then I always tell people to look at Robert Stone's, in his short story collection, Bear and His Daughter. There is a story called Por qué no tiene, por qué lo falta, which handles a 4-person dialogue scene. And we begin with a man and his wife, or a man and a woman, married couple. And you see kind of the stress in their marriage right away. And then we hear talk about another person, another guy, the bad guy. And then when the bad guy and his buddy show up, we already are prepped to see them. And we have some idea that they're part of this conflict, but until we see the conflict play out, we don't know quite how that works. So here's a question. Do editors do more than edit your book for grammar, usage, punctuation? Oh my God, yes. Your editor first is looking at the big brush issues, Are the scenes all necessary? Are they compelling? Are the characters necessary and compelling? They could tell you to take out a character. They could tell you to take out, the whole, my editor told me to take a whole section of the book. So yeah, they actually, the grammar, usage, mechanics and stuff come at the very end. It's more shaping the whole thing. Any advice about books where the reader is the main character? Trying to even picture what that would be like. The reader would never be the main character that I can think of. Often the reader's addressed, in second person by a main character, but characters are in the book, in a world that isn't quite this world and are experiencing their lives. But if you can think of something, let me know, and I'll see if I can get some ideas for you. Hi, Nadia. Let's see, is there any burning issues that we have here? Introducing characters is very interesting. As you want to make them as vivid and understandable as soon as you see them, because you want to remember them. So they have some issues, some physicality, some gestures, some way of speaking, pace, that sets them apart. Just a little thing. I haven't read The Secret Window by Stephen King. Is that one in which the reader is a protagonist? Yeah, I don't know. Can't picture it. What other questions do we have today? I've been working on the road. One of the things that is an interesting thing to do is to write a story based on a story, where you take your own material and you go through a story and divide it into beats, where are the scenes, and then what other moves is the writer making? Like I'm going through a Mary Miller story right now, and I'm looking at how she shaped. I'll show you a picture. I'm going to reverse this so you can take a look at what I'm doing. Okay, so this is the book Always Happy Hour, and I'm reading a story called The House on Main Street. And I'm going through and noticing how she sets it up, where it's general, and where do we begin to zero in on a real-time scene, just like what's going on in the story. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a short story using these beats. Backstory, back in scene. Somebody makes a big statement about the world, thinking about people's inner status, speculation, back to scene. Person number 3 comes in. And I'm doing this whole story so that I haven't written short stories in a very long time. So I am really interested in how I like this writer, and they're beautiful stories, and they're very interesting to me. They're not straightforward at all. So breaking them down and seeing how they're put together is really valuable. I mean, you know that I'll do this, recommend people write a paragraph after a paragraph that you admire, using the syntax and the length of sentence and the level of diction and stuff. It's a really good way to learn things. And you know, I do it. I'm doing it now with this. I'm done with Chimes of Lost Cathedral. I've just put out, finished 2 huge books, and I want to write short stories. So I want to write modern short stories, and I'm analyzing stories that I'm reading, really enjoying that. Okay, so here's the question about Half Asleep in Frog Pajamas is a book where the reader is the main character. And all choose your own adventure books that I read as a kid. Half Asleep in Frog Pajamas. Is that a Tom Robbins book? I'm unfamiliar with that. Here's a question from Dana. Hi, Dana. Hey. So how to weave in the exposition without being obvious? Well, yes, that is the right way to do it. So you're already thinking about how it's done. It's all like like a magician. You have to do it without giving away the secrets. So yes, say you have to tell the reader that the cholera epidemic of whatever it was, 1650 or 1720 in London was caused by bad water. And they didn't know it came from bad water. They thought poor people just kind of emanated sickness, whereas this is a contaminated well. And say you want to get that information across. And you don't want to do it in exposition because it sounds like a high school textbook. Any kind of history. I have spent the last 12 years in the Russian Revolution. Any history. You don't want the reader to feel like you are giving them a history lesson. Nobody wants to see that. If they wanted to see that, they would read nonfiction. So what you do is you make sure that your character would somehow come across that information. Say that why have they closed? I went to the pump to get my water from in London, and there's a guy hammering at the pump. And why is he hammering at the pump? What's wrong with that guy? I asked somebody who was standing around, what's wrong with that guy? And he says it's poisoned. He's a doctor. He's breaking off the handle of the pump. He says it's poison. The reason everybody's getting sick is this. So there you go. you're not giving exposition in dialogue, because you're not saying, well, Johnny, there is a color epidemic and they believe this to be. No, we're seeing him do it and somebody's describing it as they're watching it in real time. So you always want to hide it's just like giving a kid medicine, you want to disguise it. You want to make sure it's embodied, that it's part of the story. Let's see, what's this? So the make your own adventure. I'm trying to think of how that would differ from a first person piece of writing. Hard for me to picture. And something about a movie, which I'm not kind of understanding what the question is here. Okay, well, any other questions? But introducing, facts into your stuff, it all has to be very natural. There has to be a reason it's being brought in, that it's not just pause the action and give you history. Although you can start a chapter, just setting a chapter like that. In 1865, Dr. So-and-so broke the handle off the Bow Street pump. And, you can do a little bit of it, but if it's too much, the reader rebels. What else can I tell you about writing? So writing from an exemplar, taking a story that you like and doing the beats, and then figuring out the moves they're making, and then writing a story about something very different. Maybe I'll write a story about a camper at summer camp, but using the unfolding of the story that I was marking up. I think that'll be a really good exercise for me. And because, it's an exploration, I don't need it to be a finished story. I don't need it to work. I don't care if it works. I just want to try it out. One of the things that problem writers get into is we get so purposeful. We want everything to end up as a publishable piece. And you don't grow that way. You grow by making experiments. Some of them work, some of them don't. And seeing what happens if you do this, if you do that. And I strongly recommend the experimental method to just, especially in short stories. I'm trying to tell everybody to use short stories more, even if you're not a short story writer, to go ahead and use it as a laboratory. You can try things out that you don't want to try out in a novel, because you don't want to be a year and a half down the road and discovers, it just doesn't hold up, or it doesn't hold your interest. Okay, anything else that I can tell you? It's nice to be away from home and see some new things, and hear some I've heard some great stories that I can keep in my notebooks for wild characters. Authors often talk about, here's Linda, authors often talk about characters taking over and becoming their own, doing their own thing. How do you know when the character is becoming their own or you're losing the character? I can feel it. To me, it's all what I crawl along on my gut and my gut reaction. And when I feel like I'm playing with paper dolls, when I'm, and they're saying, I know it's dead. I know it's gone flat. I've lost something. The character should be standing up and moving around and saying things and having insights and having problems and balking sometimes. There's something I want them to do. It's like, do the paper doll thing. And it's like, no, you do the paper doll thing. So when they've gone dead, go back to where they were still alive, or ask them questions. Like when they go flat for me, I know I've run out of things I know about them. And so sometimes we have to have a conversation. I have to kind of quiet myself down and go into the beautiful garden and sit on the bench and let them join me on the bench and ask them questions. Like what's wrong? What is with you? Why aren't you talking to me anymore? What did I do? What do you really want to do? What do you really want out of this situation? Very, very helpful to do. So, well, with that, I will, happy Writing Wednesday on Thursday. Hope the writing goes well. And anytime you want me to do one of these videos on a certain subject, just leave them in comments. All right. Thank you very much. Bye.